He mocked my clothes, laughed at my shoes, said I'd never make money, and definitely never make a woman stay. Then he fired me like I was worthless. 5 years later, he walked into my office looking for help, and found his wife on her knees under my desk, fixing the cord, wearing the tight skirt I told her to keep on. This is the story of how I turned every insult into control, and made him watch me enjoy what he never could. I was 24 when I started working for Damian North. On paper, he was the kind of man people admired. Wealthy, articulate, commanding. But under all that polish was something rotten. He didn't mentor. He belittled. He didn't challenge. He crushed. And he never missed an opportunity to remind me that I didn't belong there. I was the youngest guy on the team, barely surviving off 2 jobs and vending machine dinners. But I showed up on time, worked hard, and stayed quiet. I thought that would be enough. It never was. Not for someone like him. If you didn't dress like him, drive like him, and laugh at his passive-aggressive jokes, you were disposable. He once said I looked like someone who'd never been invited to the real table. "You're not hungry enough," he told me, smirking. "You're just desperate." And that's not the same thing. I remember standing there, holding a folder he had just tossed back at me, trying not to react. That was the first time I realized something. He didn't just want to win. He wanted others to feel small while he did it. Damian had a talent for sniffing out weakness. And mine? I was broke, invisible, and still trying to prove I deserved a seat. I spent more time calculating which bills I could delay than caring about quarterly reports. I didn't hate him yet. Not then. I just feared becoming him. The turning point came during an all-hands meeting. Damian had noticed a typo in one of my reports. An autocorrect error, nothing major. But in front of the entire office, he called me out. "This is the attention to detail that got your generation broke," he said. People laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was safer than silence. My ears rang. My hands were still. I didn't speak. But inside, something shifted. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt focused. That moment lit a fuse. I didn't quit. I didn't lash out. I took note. Because some men get loud when they burn. I decided to burn quietly, slowly, until the heat reached everything he touched. That night, I stayed late. Not to impress him, but to write down every flaw in the company, every inefficiency, every hole in the system, every habit he abused. I wasn't documenting to improve it. I was preparing to outperform it. I went home, opened my laptop, and revived a side project I had abandoned 6 months earlier. A small automation tool for freelance teams. It was clunky, but functional. And it was mine. I didn't need to build a billion-dollar empire overnight. I just needed to build something that couldn't be mocked. That night, I coded until sunrise. My eyes burned, but my brain was clearer than it had been in years. The next morning, I wore the same shoes again, on purpose. Damian made another comment. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had a secret now, and secrets are stronger than suits. From that day on, I gave him the version of me he expected. Quiet, obedient, invisible. But underneath, I was evolving, studying, building, learning, watching how power moved in silence. He thought he was humiliating me, but really, he was training me. Every insult, every smirk, every meeting I wasn't invited to. I took all of it, and I turned it into blueprints. He had no idea what I was building, but one day, he'd walk into it. For the next 8 months, I played both games. By day, I worked under Damian's radar, filing his reports, making his coffee, laughing at his hollow jokes. By night, I built a system that would replace men like him. My automation tool evolved, faster than I expected. I didn't just improve the UI, I added features Damian's company didn't even dream of. Eventually, I started sharing it anonymously on freelancer forums. By the 3rd week, I had 1,200 users. By the 2nd month, I was charging. It didn't make me rich overnight, but it gave me something I'd never had before. Traction. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be noticed. I was quietly becoming undeniable. Damian didn't notice the shift. He was too busy chasing bigger clients and sleeping with his own ego. But I noticed it in myself. The day I paid my rent without calculating what to skip, I smiled like I'd won a war. By month 6, I had a silent investor, a guy who used my tool to build a remote team for his startup. He asked if I wanted capital. I said no. I asked for infrastructure instead. Within weeks, I had a cloud server and an engineering partner who believed in the product more than I did. That's when I knew it was time to leave. But I wasn't just going to quit. Damien had given me a stage for his mockery. Now I wanted to leave him with a hole he couldn't patch. I scheduled a fake client presentation, something he always handed off to me. I prepped it perfectly. Data, slides, confidence. The day of the pitch, I walked in early, wearing a new shirt and the same old shoes. Damien looked annoyed. "Try not to embarrass me this time," he said. I just smiled. I delivered the entire presentation flawlessly, so flawlessly that the client actually asked for a long-term engagement. Damien grinned like he had just won the lottery. I handed him the client's signed agreement. Then I turned to the room and said, "Also, I'll be stepping away from the company effective immediately." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Damien blinked. "Excuse me?" I nodded. "I've accepted an offer to run my own firm. Today was my last meeting." He followed me into the hallway like a man chasing a ghost. "You can't just leave. Not now. Not like this." I turned to him calmly. "You don't remember half of what you've said to me, do you?" He scoffed. "Is this about the shoes? You're being sensitive." I leaned in slightly. "No, I'm being strategic. And I never forgot the shoes." His jaw clenched. "You think you're ready to lead something?" I didn't answer. I pulled my keycard from my pocket, snapped it in half and dropped it in the trash. He stood there, confused, angry, suddenly unsure of himself. And for the first time I saw fear. Not in his words, but in his silence. I walked out of that building, like it had never belonged to me because it hadn't. But what I was walking toward, that was mine. My product had just landed a major licensing deal. My company had 4 full-time employees and a waiting list. But more than that, I had peace. Not the kind you buy with success, but the kind that comes from knowing you never have to fake a laugh again. Damien had trained me in pain. I was about to return the favor in success, quietly, efficiently, and with just enough fire to leave a scar. I first saw her again at a networking dinner. Not some gala or red carpet event, just a quiet gathering of professionals and startup founders in a rooftop lounge. I was talking to an investor when I noticed her across the room. Same blonde hair, same graceful posture, but something in her eyes had changed. Tired, distant, like someone who was slowly learning that the life she thought she wanted wasn't what she got. Julia, Damien's wife, or at least, she had been. We'd only met twice before when I worked for him. Once in the hallway, once in the elevator. She'd always been polite but guarded. That night, though, she walked toward me like she remembered every second of those 2 moments. "Wait, Nathan?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I smiled. "Still remember the shoes?" She laughed. Not fake, not out of politeness, the kind of laugh that carried something real. "Damien hated those shoes," she said, "which is probably why I liked them." We talked for maybe 15 minutes. She asked what I'd been up to, and I gave her the vague version. Running something small. Doing okay. She didn't brag either. But in between her words, I caught the signs. She wasn't happy. She never said it directly. But you can hear exhaustion when you've lived through it. I didn't push. I just listened. Before she left, she handed me her card. "In case you ever need help with operations," she said. "I'm better with logistics than people realize." 2 weeks later, I emailed her. Not as a play, as a move. I just closed a deal that would double our workload. I needed someone I could trust, someone polished but unafraid. She showed up to the interview in black heels and a storm gray dress, calm, composed, focused. We barely mentioned Damien. She didn't ask about him and I didn't offer. I hired her the next day, officially as operations assistant. Unofficially, she became the most efficient person on my team. In less than a month, she'd streamlined 3 of our core workflows. Clients loved her, staff respected her, and every time she walked into my office, she didn't look at me like I was lucky to have her. She looked at me like she was exactly where she wanted to be. At first, I kept a line between us, strictly professional. But connections don't ask for permission. They just build, quietly, stubbornly. One night, after a long call with a client in Dubai, I offered her a drink. She stayed in the office sitting across from me, tie loosened, shoes off, just talking. About books. About cities we wanted to visit. About how ambition can be lonely. There was no flirting. Just energy. Real, focused energy. The kind you only find when two people are done pretending to be smaller than they are. Before she left, that night, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, "you never once brought him up. That's probably why I trust you. I didn't ask if they were still together. I didn't care. Whatever she'd been to him, trophy, partner, excuse, she was no longer playing that role. She was here now, with me, not because she needed saving, but because she'd outgrown, pretending." Julia wasn't part of the revenge. She was part of the rebuild. And the way she looked at me that night, I knew she didn't see the kid in the hallway anymore. She saw the man her husband never became. It was a Wednesday. Quiet. Clean sky. One of those days where the city seems almost polite. I had a meeting with a prospective client, a mid-sized consultancy looking for automation systems to cut overhead. Their CEO had reached out personally, said he was bringing a technical partner to sit in. I didn't care who he brought. I had Julia running point on the proposal. She printed the reports, prepped the room, set out the glasses, and arranged the seats. Just like she always did. Precise, poised, unfazed. 10 minutes before the meeting, she asked, "Want me to stay in the room?" I said, "Of course." She gave a tight nod and went to check the projector. The elevator dinged. 2 men stepped out. One young, briefcase in hand. The other, older, heavier, grayer than I remembered. Damien. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy scanning the layout, judging the furniture, controlling the space. That was his style. Dominate the room before anyone speaks. Then he looked left, saw Julia standing near the projector, and stopped walking. His face didn't twist. His jaw didn't drop. He just froze, like a system error he couldn't process. Julia turned slowly. Calm. Not cold. Not smug. Just professional. "Good morning, Mr. North," she said, like she was reading off a schedule. He blinked twice. "Julia?" I stepped forward and extended my hand. "Nice to see you again, Damien." His head snapped toward me. I watched him struggle to decide whether to fake familiarity or pretend we'd never met. He chose wrong. "Do I know you?" He paused. Recognition hit like a glass shattering. "Nathan?" I smiled. "Not wide, just enough." "Still wearing the same shoes," I said, and pointed at the polished black Oxfords, the same pair he once mocked. "And still better than yours." His partner laughed, awkward and confused. Damien said nothing. I gestured to the table. "Shall we begin?" We sat. Julia handed him the agenda without hesitation. He hesitated. His hands weren't steady. He flipped through the pages like they might bite him. The pitch went smoothly. I explained the software, the back-end structure, the financials. Damien didn't speak for the first half. When he finally did, he aimed a question not at me, but at Julia. "You work here now?" She didn't even look at him. "I do." "And you're his assistant?" Her voice didn't flinch. "Among other things." I didn't blink. He shifted in his seat, suddenly sweating. "Well, impressive setup," he said. "Didn't expect to see you. Both." After the meeting, his partner pulled me aside. "Just being honest," he said. "You're ahead of what we've seen elsewhere. Expect a call." Damien lingered by the door, eyes on Julia. He opened his mouth twice and said nothing. I stepped between them. "I'll walk you out." In the elevator, he finally muttered, "How did you end up here?" I looked him in the eye. "Because of you." The door opened. He stepped out, paused, and turned. "Is this revenge?" I smiled, slow. "No. This is alignment." He stared for a beat, then walked off, slower than before. For once, he had no words to poison the room, and that was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. Julia was never supposed to be part of the story. Not the strategy, not the vengeance, not the rebuilding. She was just supposed to be a familiar face in a new chapter. But familiarity can turn into gravity if you're not careful. And with her, I didn't want to be careful. She wasn't soft, but she was safe. She didn't ask for favors, but she gave clarity. I had worked years to silence the chaos inside me. And somehow, in the middle of boardrooms and contracts, she spoke to it. Not with sympathy, but with understanding. Every time she walked into my office, it felt less like a workplace, and more like a landing zone. She didn't talk about Damien after that meeting, not once. But her rhythm changed. She stayed later. She started knocking before entering, even when she didn't need to. Like she was trying to respect a boundary that didn't exist yet. One night, while going over a late proposal, she stopped mid-sentence. "You never asked me why I left him." I looked up. "I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." She stared for a moment. He made me feel small, like I was decoration with a credit card. I didn't respond with pity, just nodded. "He made me feel small too," I said. "Difference is, I needed it. You didn't." That was the first time she touched me, her hand on mine, not hesitant, not flirty, just real. Like she was anchoring both of us in the moment. From there, things unfolded without labels. We didn't announce anything. There were no declarations. Just long mornings with shared coffee, evenings where our chairs sat a little too close, and the kind of silence between two people that feels full instead of empty. Some nights, she'd take off her heels and sit cross-legged on my couch, asking about code she'd never write or systems she'd never build, just to understand what I'd built with my pain. I never thought I'd explain that to anyone. And yet, with her, I wanted to. Eventually, she stopped calling it the company and started calling it ours. The word slipped out the first time during a hiring meeting. "If we're bringing someone new onto our team," she said without blinking. I didn't correct her, because she was right. This place had my fingerprints, but it had her balance, my fire, her structure, my past, her future. I used to believe success was a solo sport, something you built alone, earned alone, and protected alone. Julia dismantled that myth without saying a word. She didn't need to fight for space beside me. She simply stood there until I realized I didn't want that space empty, and yet a part of me still wondered. Was I with her because I wanted her, or because she once belonged to the man who broke me? The question kept me up some nights. Not because I doubted her intentions, but because I doubted my own. Revenge is a beautiful fuel, but it's toxic when left unchecked. So I asked her, one night, straight up, "Why me?" She smiled, slow and tired. "Because when you look at me, I feel real. Not impressive, not pretty, just seen." That answer? It destroyed the last trace of Damien's ghost in my head. Not because she chose me, but because she reminded me I didn't have to keep proving I was worth choosing. It had been months since I last saw Damien. After that meeting, he disappeared from our radar. No emails, no requests, no awkward follow-ups. I figured his pride couldn't stomach being ignored. But men like him don't go down easy. They circle back when they think the room's forgotten the damage they caused. It was a Friday. Julia and I were finalizing a new rollout when the receptionist buzzed my office. "There's a Mr. North here. Says it's urgent." I didn't move. I just looked at Julia. She met my eyes, then turned calmly toward the hallway. "I'll get it," she said. I stayed seated, arms resting on the table, heart perfectly still. I didn't need to see him. Not yet. Julia walked out, heels tapping softly against the floor, each step more controlled than the last. I pictured him in the lobby, checking his reflection in the glass, adjusting his tie, trying to wear authority like armor. But that armor didn't work here, not anymore. Through the tinted glass, I watched her open the door. Damien stood tall at first, but the second he saw her, his posture faltered. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I could read the exchange like subtitles in a film. She didn't yell, didn't flinch, just stood there, poised, unreadable. Whatever he said, she listened without reaction. Then she crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly. I knew that posture. I'd seen it in meetings when a client lied. Then she stepped aside, letting him walk in alone. He looked older, not just in face, in spirit. Like time had started settling its debts on his shoulders. He paused when he saw me. "Nathan," he said, voice smaller than I remembered. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, slowly, like a man unsure if the furniture would hold. "I need help," he said. No small talk, no ego left. My firm's bleeding. Investors pulled out. I made mistakes. I didn't interrupt. He kept going. You built something impressive. I see that now. I was wrong about you. He stopped just short of saying, sorry. That word still cost him too much. I was wondering, he said, if you might be willing to collaborate. Or advise. Even part-time. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear my own pulse. I leaned back. You want to work with me? He nodded. I can bring value, connections, and I raised a hand to cut him off. Let me ask my assistant. Julia walked in like she'd been waiting the whole time. Damien turned to her, hopeful, desperate. Julia, he started. She didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, we're not interested. His face dropped. You don't even know the terms. She stepped closer. The man who fired him laughed while doing it. The man sitting here today is asking for scraps. Either way, you're not someone we build with. She turned to me. Do you need anything else from him? I shook my head. We're good. She opened the door. Damien stood up, but didn't move. His eyes flicked between us, realizing. The two people he once underestimated were now the ones closing the door on him. After that day, Damien didn't come back. No more messages. No more attempts. Just silence. But I knew he watched. Through clients we shared, through LinkedIn updates, through the industry blogs that started mentioning my name more than his, I'd catch him in the view count of our webinars or in the list of new followers on our newsletter. Never said a word, but he saw it all. Every launch, every feature, every hire, and every photo Julia and I posted from events where we stood, side by side, co-hosting panels and speaking about leadership. He didn't need to be present to feel the burn. The worst revenge isn't rejection. It's visibility, knowing they can't touch what you've become. I didn't build the company to beat him. Not originally. But once he became the wall in front of me, I turned my plans into weapons. I didn't destroy him publicly. I didn't mock him online. I didn't become the monster he was. I became the man he never expected. Every time someone quoted me in an article, I knew he read it. Every time I walked onto a stage, I imagined him at home, hearing my name in a place he used to own. And Julia? She didn't just survive him. She outranked him. She evolved into something so much more than his shadow. Watching her thrive in my world, our world, was the sweetest correction the universe ever delivered. One night, after a gala where we'd both been awarded for innovation in operations, Julia leaned over in the back seat of the car and whispered, "Do you think he watched the live stream?" I smirked. He had the link. She laughed quietly. Not bitter, just satisfied. That's when I realized something. I didn't need to beat Damien anymore. I already had. Not by force, not by anger, by refusing to carry him with me. I let go of him long before he let go of me, and that's why I kept rising, because I stopped using him as fuel. At some point, I didn't need the fire anymore. The wind was finally enough. Still, there was satisfaction in knowing he saw what happened next. The new headquarters, the media coverage, the Forbes piece calling Julia the sharpest ops mind in tech, the partnership we signed with a firm that once rejected my resume. He saw the full arc, the boy he mocked, becoming the man his wife now chose, and he couldn't take credit for any of it. That's what hurt him most. Not that I succeeded, but that my success had nothing to do with him anymore. He went from the center of my story to a footnote in my victory, a name we no longer mentioned. In meetings, a ghost we'd outgrown. Some people chase apologies, others chase status. I didn't want either. I just wanted clarity. I wanted the kind of life that made him irrelevant. And I built it. Day by day. Late night by late night. Not to make him suffer, but so that one day he'd sit alone, phone in hand, watching me speak on a stage he once called unreachable, and realize I made it without needing his approval, his mentorship, or his forgiveness. And that was enough. I never got a message from him after that. No apology, no closure. And I didn't need one. The closure wasn't in words, it was in moments. Small, silent moments. Like when I walked into my own office one morning, and Julia was already there. Coffee in one hand, new client contract in the other. Like when a junior employee nervously asked me a question during a meeting, and I answered with patience, because I remembered what it felt like to be looked at like you didn't belong. Or when I caught myself smiling, alone, in the elevator, just because I knew no one could fire me anymore. That's what victory looked like. It didn't roar. It echoed. I sometimes wonder what Damien thinks when he hears my name now. Does it sting? Does he remember the jokes, the smirks, the day he fired me and called it doing me a favor? I hope he does, not out of spite, but because it means I mattered, even for a second. Because the truth is, people like him spend their lives believing they can shape others through fear. What they never expect is that someone will take that fear, refine it, and turn it into a throne. He thought he built my ceiling. What he built was my floor. The last time I saw his name was on a list of companies trying to raise funding. I didn't respond. Julia and I never called what we had revenge, not even in private. We just called it rebuilding, healing in high definition. Some nights, when the office lights dim and the building's quiet, we sit on the couch in the corner suite and talk about where it all began. Not because we're stuck in the past, but because the past became the soil, and every empire needs roots. I used to think pain was fuel, but now I think peace is the real power. Being able to walk past the old battlefield without needing to look back. That's when you know you've won. Still, I'll admit something. On quiet nights, I leave the windows open just a little. Not for the breeze, for the sound. So if he ever walks by that building, if he ever pauses on the street outside, he might hear the faint hum of our team, the laughter echoing from my office, the rhythm of a place built without him. And maybe, just maybe, he'll recognize the sound. Not as noise, but as footsteps. The ones he thought he'd erased. The ones he taught me to make, step by step, quiet, cold, unstoppable. I didn't win loudly. I didn't need to. I just made sure he heard every single step.